Sahanavavatu, Sahano Bhunatu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our studies illuminate the mind. May we not unnecessarily argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Well, I'm going to do something a little unusual, just to shock you all. I'm going to go back to basics and ask if there are any questions. You all look very shocked.
So one of the questions that was asked in the retreat about the 5 sheets of consciousness and the body of energy and the body of and the mind and the intellect and the Atman and their physical location in the body. That was one of the questions that was asked. So where does this energy body resides in the body, and where does the mind resides in the body, and where does the intellect resides in the body, and where does the Atman resides in the body? Now, in this context, I understand that the answer is that it resides everywhere, and there is no particular location as such. But then at the same time, there are some seats for places. For example, if there is an injury in a certain place in the head, one may lose the vision. So, so there are some internal organs connected somewhere in the brain, where if the injury happens there, we lose vision or hearing or anything like that. So it seems that there is some specialized area for different aspects of the mind. So it's
No,
not
there are
equally
some
present everywhere, all these different sheets of consciousness. So
yes,
thought maybe-
yeah. Okay, so you see, we should be careful not to mix up what we call brain and mind. And so if you're a physicalist or a materialist, then you'll say, well, there can be nothing more subtle and nothing subtle in the human body at all. And so therefore, what we call the activity of the mind is really just the brain's neurology. But then it doesn't really answer an ultimate question. So what is enabling the neurology and its physical performance? And there's no doubt there's a correlation between our states of consciousness and between the brain. We know this very clearly. Somebody gives you a general anesthetic, then you're not aware of anything and you drift off into, well, you go through the same phases probably as sleep. So there's a gradual lessening of awareness, but the awareness still remains, and that awareness is akin to deep sleep. So we know that we can manipulate these states of consciousness because of the correlation between brain and mind. Brain, mind, and body. And brain is part of the body anyway. We shouldn't think otherwise. So the only example we can give really, well, we can give many examples, but one great lucid example would be our experience right now. So we're talking under a light, but you'll know the light bulb has a certain duration and can be extinguished. Of course, the general extinction would be switching off the current, disconnecting the current. And when the current flows, can flow in various ways according to the adapter. So we're a multi-purpose adapter, and behind it is what we can call divine grace. And divine grace is broadcasting, as it were, throughout and arriving as a body and arriving as a mind. And mind is physical in the sense that mind is subtle version of what we call the body. But you see, the more subtle we go, you're quite right, we can't put it in a location necessarily. Although, because of the correlation, there is a location which becomes more and more and more and more subtle. And the more subtle we go in, as it were, In other words, the more we uncover, the more we uncover the source of an overall light, then the broader it becomes, the less defined it becomes. So if we say, for example, even if you go into a coma, in other words, the consciousness of the mind goes into a deep sleep equivalent, there is still an energy that still keeps things going. Now we have to get into the habit of reassigning all these things to its correct source. Don't think it is your body, don't think it's your mind, don't think it's your energy. You put it all to the registration of the divine source of the universe that is expressing itself as rays or waves of divine grace. But something like a broadcasting company broadcasting a message from a broadcasting station. Here in Ireland, it's around Stillorgan, let's say, around that area. One station delivering a broadcast at your transistor radio, you catch it simultaneously. You don't have to go to the broadcasting station. You don't have to request a delivery. And so a broadcast waves are happening everywhere. It goes on, and all the transistors that catch it, they're there in your house, more and more sophisticated, with a greater range, greater capacity to catch the waves. So what does a person need to hear these broadcasts? Well, he must have this transistor or some other mechanism to catch the waves, all to do with radio transmission. Same thing you're using for a mobile phone. You're catching the waves. And because the waves have a certain range, then you have to have, at the mobile level, for that kind of level, then you have to have multiple stations. And so that is why we call them cell phones, because each location, as it were, each substation is a cell. And we go from cell to cell and hardly notice it. We think it's a continuous broadcast. We probably don't even think of it as a broadcast. And so what is necessary to catch it is the instrument to catch it. What is necessary is the determination to use the agency, to use the machine, the technology that is there, that instrument, and then we catch the broadcast. And it's arriving right where you are at the localized station, that you somehow inform or misinform yourself as this is me. But you see, it's not you in its entirety. It's only some instrument. And so in spiritual life, we can apply this principle of broadcasting. And when we apply it, we solve many, many problems. The natural thing is identifying with the instrument, overall called body, or body-mind complex. The next question is, I being here, where do I go when I die? But when we shift our point of view, using this analogy of broadcasting, it's equivalent to asking, when my small transistor goes, what becomes of the broadcast? Where does it go? It's not going anywhere. The grace of the broadcasting station is being felt everywhere. And it's flowing, and it's always flowing. And in spiritual life, we can compare this to the divine grace that is always flowing. It's only our failure to tune into this that it prevents us from getting it, from acquiring it. We sit down and say, we pray for divine grace. Let divine grace come to me. Let God's presence come to me, not knowing that we're isolating ourselves from the connection. So how do we remedy that? We put the connection in, just as we switch a light switch on and make the connection. The electrical current is already there. It never went. It never left. So these analogies will help us to understand that this grace is always flowing. Now, of course, the 19th century mystic that we know of, Sri Ramakrishna, states that the wind of divine grace. He says the wind of God's grace is always blowing. Well, then why don't we feel it? Well, we have to set the sail. And not only will we connect with the wind, but the wind will also carry it. The wind is greater than ourselves. You can imagine no wind being present, the sail being set. It won't open up unless there's a force that does it. And we can huff and puff on the sail, nothing will happen. Our effort is minimal. But the wind is a very powerful thing. You can even set the sail without putting it in the water, and it has an urge to go on. In this way, what keeps this urge to tune in is the urge for perfection. And we have a particular instrument for that. The instrument that we used is called antakarana. It's an internal instrument. We can call it the mind, which is correlated, no doubt, to the brain. But it's not. It's more subtle than that, more pervasive than that. We don't know what its borders are. And we can observe it. And when we observe it, it must occur to us, I'm not that. You take a gear shift, manual gear in a car, and you don't make the car move, you allow it just to be stationary, and you shift this gear 1,000 times. From the bottom to the middle to the top, bottom, middle, top, bottom, middle, top. After 30,000 times of shifting, it will surely occur to you, without having a teacher to teach you, I'm not this gear stick. So we have to, this is what we mean by practice. Practice means the continuous exercise of discerning, I'm not that. I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. Well, we have to make sure that we use the terms correctly, because in the Upanishads, this and that are specific terms. This means if I wave my hand, indicating all the objects that are within my range of seeing and hearing and touching and tasting and so on, my whole universe that I can observe, then I can call it this, all of this. But when I say that, it's reserved for something that doesn't change, something that is not observed, but is an ultimate observer. So the Bhagavad Gita is useful in understanding how this works. It's understanding how we should exert ourselves all the time to keep this tuning up. Because this spirituality will be the art of staying sportfully attuned, more accurately, keeping the attention sportfully, artfully tuned in to the glory of the divine self, what religion calls God. And doing it once or twice, we can do it, no doubt, but we have to learn to increase that. We know that the attention, which is the instrument or the key part of this antakarana, this internal instrument, can be shifted and changed and used and manipulated like a gear stick or like a searchlight. You can direct it here, direct it there, and it becomes a revealing thing. Revealing what? Anything you want to know in the objective world or the inner world. Truth about all of these things are only revealed because of this probing instrument. Udared atmanatmanam atmanam avasadayat atmai vahya atmano bandhur atmai varipur atmanaha. Let a person, let a man or a person raise themselves up by themselves. Let them not lower themselves. For he alone is the friend of himself. And he alone is also his enemy. You think the other person is your enemy? No. So what does all that mean? Well, we have to have a good deal of explanation about it. So this antakarana can grasp the truth when it's properly tuned in to the object that needs to be revealed. Truth about what? Truth about anything. truth about the objective world, truth about the physical and physics realities, truth about your own nature, truth about your psychology, but also truth about your inner self. So it requires tuning, and we'll get the truth about anything. And the fact that you are sitting here listening, either online or physically present, is an indication that this antakarana, this internal instrument, can grasp something outside itself. But there are also so many other items because sounds are there other than my voice. Sights are also there. Activities are also going on continuously. Well, the instrument being there, the object being there, we should catch everything simultaneously. How is it that we don't? It is only because of this particular tool, this particular fine-tuned instrument we have called attention. And when we say, let a man raise himself by himself, we're saying, let you take your attention and tune it into something higher, something that doesn't cause you difficulties. And the normal way that we use this internal instrument is not as an instrument at all. We let it run by itself. And if that happens, then don't be surprised that any knowledge is not revealed to you. So we can grasp anything by using this internal instrument, and the internal apparatus is capable actually of receiving everything theoretically. But there's one principle that we have to keep in mind, and that is this revelation of everything cannot happen simultaneously. It has to happen within Sora time. It happens second by second or minute by minute or whatever unit you use. And there's a reason for that. It's to avoid difficulty, confusion, and overload. Imagine now, you see, in a car, you have 4 pistons going up and down in a kind of irregular sequence. The engineer designs it like that. So it might be something like, I don't know, 1, 4, 2, 3 or something. And every time the piston goes up, then there's a sensitive instrument which is able to catch and activate the pistons that are going up and down in the sequence that is necessary. They can't all go up at the same time. It's on a camshaft. One goes up, another one goes down. This makes the car move. If all the pistons go up and down at the same time, it doesn't work. So there's a sequence, you can say within time, there's a sequence, we call it timing even. So they fire simultaneously? No, they don't. It's a cup-like structure, which is called a distributor, that enables this sequential firing. So we can see that that distributor, that sensitive arm that allows this particular engineered movement that fires off the piston and makes it move and rotates things thereafter, is something like the attention. And we can make it a light on whatever we choose, with the effect of revealing whatever is there. Whether we are fully aware of it being revealed, whether we take it for granted, we can look at an object, having seen it before. So there's a selection process also that's going on. So it may be aware of many things, but is only suitable to be efficient if it is only aligned 1 unit at a time. Take a person who knows 1,000 songs. How many songs do you know? 1,000 songs. Okay, all my life I learned these songs. All right, please sing them now. No, don't start with one or one note or anything. A whole lot, you can't do it. And fortunately for us, that's good. We're only capable of catching 1 unit, one thing at a time. And so the potentiality for revealing everything is there. But when we practically apply it, then we can raise ourselves up by our own effort and lower ourselves. All the manifestations are regulated in this sort of time, in this sort of way. And we cannot sing 1,000 songs all at once. All the sentences, if you read a book, all the sentences are there, available. The instrument for seeing is available. The interpretive faculty of the mind is available. Everything is standing by, available. But you see, you can't reveal all the thing in one go. So all knowledge is possible, but the internal instrument being there, it shuts out also many things. And so what is the urge that makes the attention move itself? Well, you might say it's natural selection, but here we have to call it the urge for perfection, or the urge that moves us towards perfection. All creatures will have it. All creatures want to advance, become better, improve. They have an inner technology that urges them to refine in response to the environment around them. So the antakarana, the internal instrument, being sensitive, it's sensitive enough, and the external world being there, all knowledge does not come simultaneously. So it's not in the object. It's something like that. It's ready to receive messages. The world is ready to send messages. But if we had it all simultaneously, we'd be bombarded 24 hours of the day. We wouldn't get any sleep. So the key is the point or force called the attention. And it is this that we have to apply to raise ourselves up. And if we don't bother, it'll lower down. And in lowering down, it becomes evil. What is evil? Evil is that mechanism or that diverting thing which will take our attention away from the glory of the self that lies already there within you, is already there. And when your attention is not controlled, when it wanders away, when it's not tuned in, then of course this is called evil. We are lowering ourselves. Bandhur atmana tvanas tasya yena tvai vatma, that goes like that, jitaha, to him who has conquered his self, that means body mind, that thing that we take as in an ownership way. Conquered by what? The internal self, that witnessing, unmoving, unchanging entity. Then his own self, that is his body-mind complex, is his friend. But to him who has not conquered this body-mind complex, then his own self acts like an enemy. Now, never mind about all the subtle bodies and so on. There's only two things we can control. What we generally call this antakarana, this internal instrument. We can also call it collectively mind if we choose, and the body. And so we have to start some discipline. So, not to allow negative thoughts. Negative thoughts will lower a person, and the positive thoughts will elevate the mind. So evil from this standpoint is that which affects or removes the possibility of getting knowledge or realization now. The now being available, the knowledge being available now, why don't we get it? It is because if you say so many times, for example, I'm a sinner, I'm weak, I'm ill, I'm not well, I'm unhealthy, I'm this, I'm sensitive. Don't look at me, I'm sensitive. Any of these things. This then will produce a world which is an environment of weakness. In putting such negative thoughts, you're barring your own progress. So a person should exert and not lower himself. Who is lowering himself? He himself. So all the scriptures are addressed not to God, but they're addressed to oneself to create not for him to create a favorable world, but to the human beings. Don't do that, don't do that, don't do this. Scripture assumes that any person has a capacity for just a few seconds at least to catch the attention and tune it into something. And create also, in doing this, another tendency. You may not be able to do it for 1 hour, say, at a stretch, but surely you can do it for a few seconds. And then you can do it for a few more seconds, and you can do it for some minutes, then you can do it for an hour, then you can do it for days and build up a habit. So, in doing this, instead of answering the question directly in terms of a person who says, but what about fatalism? What about my free will? Free will is something you say I have to exert, but I don't believe in free will. I believe that fate is predestined. Well, there's a story like that. A teacher seeing a pupil who says that, a scientifically minded person say, it's all a deterministic world, and there's no such thing as free will. Free will is a kind of illusion. And the teacher will say, all right, please sit here now for a while. And what I want you to do is repeat after me the days of the week. Repeat after me, the names of the stars, names of the planets. Repeat the names of famous people, please. And one after the other, the student will repeat them. Now the student will say to the teacher will say to the student, what happened to your free will? It was all changed. What happened? Obviously, you made a choice. What happened to your fate, your fatalism? What happened to your predestination? What happened to your normal pattern? How is it that you managed to shake up your pattern and change it? And the student will look a little startled, but hopefully get the idea. So when what we call faith, fate doesn't really work, and we can switch onto something, even just for a few seconds. So anyone can do it. You must have noticed, when a child gets distressed or something, you divert its attention to something else, and it forgets all its sorrow. You'll be trying to do some work somewhere, and there's a big crash outside or something, and all your attention goes there, and everyone runs to the window. It's very easy to divert our attention. Knowing that principle, that it can be diverted, we can take control of it and steer it in a chosen way. So, we thoughts, what about other things that disturb this, that don't allow this steering, that come to us? We thoughts of anger and suspicion, jealousy. What about hatred and so on and so forth? We also want some attention here. Well, you can say, no, I have some new friends. And these new friends I can play with. Don't you want us now? Say the old friends, no, I don't want you now. These are the things that will lower us. And they'll all clamor for attention, no doubt, because they're used to doing it and used to getting it. But you can take advantage of the fact that any newcomer can be taken up and can be entertained. And if you do it frequently, repeatedly, in such a way, at intervals, we can take advantage of this small freedom that allows us to put something new, something better, raising ourselves up. So it requires some discipline. So the self-disciplined and serene person Remain steadfast. Steadfast in what? Steadfast in what we might call the Supreme Self. And that person will be steady in all circumstances. The more it's repeated and the more someone practices like that. If we properly cultivate the attention becomes one's friend. But if we neglect this attention, it becomes our own enemy. So the wind of God's grace is flowing, and it comes out to us, and it comes out to us in every form, and we can have a tuning mechanism to tune it in, a switch-on button, a way where we can steer our attention in a chosen way, scripturally based. Do this, don't do that. Then you see this discipline ultimately becomes a revealing factor. Anyway, a person who doesn't do that finds everything, or a person who doesn't do that finds everything unfavorable. A person who does it finds everything favorable to him. Then it becomes, and he himself becomes a friend. And if you haven't conquered yourself by your own self, then your own self is the external foe, external enemy that appears, that you have predestined, if you will. So then there's another useful passage in the Bhagavad Gita from chapter 5 and 13 it goes. And it says, renouncing all actions by thought and self-control, the embodied one rests happily in the nine-gated city, neither acting nor causing to act. And you'll have seen me give you a variety of these, one of which is contained in the Katha Upanishad that refers to 11-gated city. But when we say renouncing all actions, what we mean, it means applying something called discernment and being self-controlled. But what does a person do? Well, the embodied one, that one who's apparently within the body, is usually called a jiva, or the individual spirit, because we have a sense still of connectedness with a body, or at least with all these other levels or sheaths that we have within us. And even when the body goes, those attachments are still there. But where is this ultimate owner or deity or king or emperor of the city? Is residing in the heart. Now, don't take it literally, because it's not an imprisoned thing. And because nobody experiences this, I am inside the body. You're going to experience I'm inside the car. If you were to experience I'm inside the body, then you look up and then you see the larynx, or you see the hollow of the skull. Look down there, you see the hollow of the legs. Look on one side, there's the kidney. Then there's a pump on the one side, pumping away. And then you see there's the tympanum that is beating like a drum and so on. Nobody experiences this. So what does it mean? Well, supposing we take the analogy of the robot that is being used, say, in Mars, perhaps everything is moving by remote control. And that's the point. By its presence alone, all these things are operating. The heart is pumping, the lungs are moving, the diaphragm is moving. And all these are moving because of a dispensed divine grace that is flowing. And if we don't know it, and if we don't attend to it, then we will take on the agency. I'm doing it. But that would be absurd. You're not going and grasping inside and pushing the diaphragm muscle up and down and say, come on, breathe. It's happening automatically. Unawares, it's happening. You don't think for a moment that the heart is beating, something like 80 beats a minute, possibly something like that, and that the blood is flowing, and that all the machinery is being repaired as we speak now, being renewed, being nourished. This is all on automatic. You can't claim that I'm doing it. You can't claim I'm digesting my food. There's an 11-gated city, or in this case, 9-gated city. That's a 7 are there in the head, eyes, ears, and so on and so forth, something like entrances. And literally absorbing all the information and then creating a whole hive, a kind of internal manufacturing system, an industrial area of busy things going on in the city. Because the activating principle is there, not doing anything, but by its mere presence, all the other supervisors and superintendents and what have you are working. Many governors, small mayors of little pockets within a city. Come on, do this, come on, do that. So I fundamentally, I'm unborn and changing in a city that is changing and moving and not doing it by itself, only doing it because there's a flow from a presence. And that flow is like divine grace. We can imagine it like a liquid. We can imagine it like a river. We can imagine it like a continuous flow of something. And wherever there's a flow that is freely distributed and arriving at what you call me and arriving at all the environment that enables this body and mind to operate, all of that is freely given with no distinctions. And that supreme source of that grace flowing will be a good investor. We're all alive. Maybe some are half asleep by now, but we're all alive. And why are we alive? Because that supreme investor distributes its own grace and keeps you there because it has a purpose for you. And as long as your fingernails grow, and as long as your hair grows, and as long as saliva flows, and as long as food gets digested, the capacity for digestion tells us that this divine grace is flowing within us in all of these different avenues, these different channels, enabling what we call life. This flow of grace, we should surely have a little thanks for. It doesn't require thanks, and it doesn't demand it. It doesn't pull you by the hair and say, hey, come on, I've been doing all this. Now please pay me. Give me a wage. And then because cost of living is going up, I think you'll have to give me more next year. Doesn't do it. So the embodied one rests happily in the 9-gated city. Happily. Where do we find joy? We find joy when we resort to that. And so all of these are there in a beautiful analogy of the city. And then nature, what we call prakriti, will consist of 3 operating faculties. You can say maya jakshena prakriti shuyati sacharacharam hetunanena kuntaya jagat vipare vartate. Nature, you see, has a threefold operation within it. We have to understand that in order to understand this flowing grace. And it comes out as these gunas, sapta, rajas, and tamas, and comes out as 5 flowing avenues of grace, 5 kinds of waves that we call tanmatras. And these tanmatras will also appear as all the bodies that we see, culminating, I suppose, crystallizing is more accurate, as, according to thought, as a particular body with a particular environment. Because all of the objects that we see or appreciate or connect with through the body and the body itself that catches it are all made from these combinations of waves. And they're not just waves. So in the quantum world, quantum physicists studying physics at the most fundamental level talk about wave behavior or wave-like behavior, or say, actually, at the subtle level, it is all waves that arise from a quantum void or something of that nature, but appears to us as a particle. Stick to the waves, they've left out one important element. They haven't registered it as the expression of the divine itself coming out. These are divine waves. The word divine has to be inserted into it. These are angels that make the crooked path straight. These are angels that combine and recombine and materialize in three kinds of categories, which we call it Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. What is our job? Our job is to steer our attention in such a way that we cultivate the best values, the values which will enable us to have a clarity of vision. And this is categorized as Sattva. Suppose an unknown me or unknown to me, I sit on a chair, I sit on the cushion of the chair, and what somebody has arranged is a complicated mechanism which, when I sit down, it turns on and activates a kind of robot, some artificial intelligence, that comes round on a tray and automatically pours my tea, and then gives a biscuit, and then gives even dunks the biscuit for me, and then puts it into the mouth. Somebody, not knowing that there's a mechanism here, will be astonished. It will be something like magic. You sit on a chair, and immediately something else happens. This is a kind of remote control. This internal controller operates in this way. So I didn't do anything. I simply sat on the chair, only sat. But the existing mechanism was enough. And that existing mechanism we call nature. And similarly, then in nature, there is this mechanism which gets activated by the presence or force of the Lord or consciousness that sits. It's not that it is confined within me. It is there, it is spread, it has no limits. Just as iron filings on a piece of paper show activity when you put a magnet underneath. If you didn't know there was a magnet, you would attribute all the movement of the filings to a mysterious force, or to say, well, they're self-moving. It's a misunderstanding of what's going on. So by the presence of the Lord only, things work. We need not do anything. We need not make others act by order. Nature itself takes over the work of moving things. Then, what is the principle here? Renouncing all actions, it says. What's the meaning of all activities are given up? Well, if I own this body, then I will be conducting all the activities myself. I'll be doing my digestion. I'll be exhausted. I won't have time for any other occupation. I'll be making sure that there's a cylinder of air going into the nostrils, into the lungs. I'll be supervising every single, I'll be squeezing every cell of the body. I myself am not doing this. Nature itself is doing it for me. Effortlessly, I'm doing it. I'm not responsible. The act of breathing and pushing the diaphragm up, I'm not responsible for it. It's happening by itself. It goes up and down automatically. And it makes me breathe and so on and so forth. So who moves that diaphragm? Well, see, as soon as a baby is born, that diaphragm begins to move up and down. And you can't say the baby owns it or did it or is responsible for it. The baby only has a sense of self-consciousness, maybe after a year or something, up to a year, something like that. So in the beginning, who does that? When the child or adult is sleeping, then who's digesting the food and enabling the breathing? Who's pumping the heart? Do you want to find out what is a connection called God? Find out the pulse. Then when you find out the pulse, ask yourself, okay, where is it coming from? Then you know the machinery of the body, it says coming from the heart, there's a pump there. That's not the ultimate answer. Who's pumping the heart, please? Who's investing that life energy by its very presence? And that is the presence, this indweller of this city. And by proper discrimination, discernment, viveka, when a person analyzes what he calls himself, he finds the waking ego is not always there. It disappears in a dream, and it's gone in a dreamless sleep completely. It disappears in a dream and comes out as other things. In dreamless sleep, it's gone. And under conditions, for example, of anesthesia, it's gone. Affecting the brain like that, it's gone. But it has nothing to do with the brain. When you take the light bulb out, then the light is gone. But the electrical current is still there. And without that, even if you put a new one in, it's not the light which is doing the work. It's not the light which is the ultimate source. No, it's the electrical current flowing behind it constantly. So this is this distinction that we make when we talk about viveka. Distinguishing, in the question that is given, distinguishing the neurophysiology from the current. The one is instrumental, is just made from material stuff. But that material stuff is made from 5 key subtle waves, all combined nicely, looking like a single object. And so to understand this principle, we have to understand these subtle elements that are in various combinations. When you understand that, all the distinction between 5 bodies goes away. Because they're simply different frequencies of the same wave system. And this is divine waves. That means your body is a divine instrument. It comes out in a divine way. It's the expression of divine grace. Knowing this, all activities will be an expression. They won't be a struggle. They won't be work. You know, when we do yoga exercise, we make a point of saying, you're not trying to achieve something. You're not trying to enter a competition. You'll derive the best benefit when you use this exercise as an expression. You stretch, and then your awareness picks up the effect of the stretch, and you put all your beautiful attention to that and enjoy the stretch. It's no enjoyment if your attention is not directed in this way, but you're running on a treadmill in a gym watching all the murders on Sky News. That's not very good for your health. Mechanically, you're moving. Or if you're doing something and you're counting the numbers, say, repetitions of doing something, trying to build muscle up, say, then after a while you'll feel, oh, it's too much strain, I have to stop, I can't go on. Well, because you're not enjoying it. You're not using it as an expression of something which is there. Go ahead.
Hello, Swamiji.
Yes.
I have a question. I was listening this from the beginning. When you said that by repeating certain words of like qualities that we are, that makes us weak. So there was one of the qualities that you mentioned that was sensitivity. I used to think that was really dangerous, but I've considered it a very strong quality to have in a personality, because you can, from my perspective, that allows you to connect more easily with others and within. So I just wanted to ask you that is sensitivity about quality to have in a personality? Should we avoid it?
So the difference, the difficulty about using words is it depends how you interpret the word. When I use the word sensitivity in a negative context, it's related to a sensitive ego, sensitive sense of I, that creates a reaction where the reaction is egocentrically orientated and says something equivalent to poor me. Somebody looks at me in a certain way and I interpret it as they don't like me, say, or some other thing. Well, the fault is not with the object. The object, we think that the object is causing some difficulty. No, my sensitivity to that would be causing difficulty. In that sense is what I meant, all right? But inner sensitivity is our guiding light. It's our revealing factor. If you say, does God exist and what's the evidence? You can't say it's from the object or it's outside. You say, I can acquire the knowledge of it by taking the sensitive instrument, which is called this internal instrument, particularly that aspect called attention, and steer it in a chosen direction to make the mind strong and steer toward the higher values. That, of course, is a good kind of sensitivity. And the difficulty with words and the English language and so on is that you can use the same word to have variations of meanings and so on. So that's the...
Thank you, Swami.
Yeah. The point is, you're not the slave of the gear rod when you use the gear rod in a motor car. And so when you use it, it's equivalent to asserting your own self, your own sense of independence. I'm not the gear stick. Why don't you feel that you are the instrument? Well, because I moved it 100,000 times in a specific way. This is called discipline. It's called spiritual practice. I chose to move it in this way, and I'll do it repeatedly. I'll do it until I understanding comes. I'm not that. You don't require a manual or an instruction to say you are not the gear stick. When you yourself are maneuvering it so often, it surely will occur to you, yes, I'm not that. So I'm not the instrument. That's on the one side. So now let us take a look. Let us say the 5th chapter is there of the Bhagavad Gita, because the 5th and 6th chapter, also the 9th chapter, one passage, all of these are very telling in terms of sending the same message and give us a way out, as it were, of our difficulties, and a way of tuning in on the other side to the divine grace which is flowing. So he is the yogi, says this passage. He is a yogi, he is a happy person. Who is the happy person? He is the happy person who's fixed in yoga. That means in this discipline of bringing the mind back to its orientation about the highest principle. The entire mental field we have to acknowledge as the Lord alone. That's the great discipline that we have to apply, or the great practice that we have to apply. From beyond the mind, from the supramental field, the mind is controlled. So when a person practices this, then that person will have an extra sensitivity or an extra awareness. That will be granted to the person. That this is the Lord, the controller of the mind, it will occur to you. So, he that is able, while still here, to withstand before freedom from the body, the impulse of desire and anger, it goes on like that. Does pleasure rest in an object, is the answer. And there is a great little story in the scriptures. Some people who know the story will remember Mitra and Chaitra. They are companions, they're two friends, and they have one girlfriend. And she is tactful, and she keeps one person on this side, the other one person on that side, and they walk down the road and do activities together. And so both are happy to be with her. But then one day she selects the one and marries. Now, theoretically, if it's in the object, she being the object of his affection, the other person would be so very happy. He doesn't have to maintain her. Somebody else is doing it and can still enjoy her company. But yet what happens? He feels miserable. He feels rejected. That means that it's all in the mind, not in the object. The object has nothing to do with it. So that's a beautiful story to test out just simply that principle. So we have to get this desire under control, and the thwarted desire will result in anger. And when she selects the one person, then the other person, instead of being happy and joyful about the whole thing, will actually start being angry and resentful, maybe wish to destroy both of these. Anger is blocked desire by definition. So these two statements say that in this very life, that is with the body on, with all the possibilities of others competing and blocking what you want to do, and in the middle of all these pressures, still, if you can smile genuinely, not in a grimacing way, not in a sinister way, and you smile and you keep your equilibrium, and you're established in one steady thing that we can call philosophically Brahman. When you practice this properly, it is possible for a person to realize the truth, is it? And is it possible to do it here and now? Your full possibility, your full potentiality, your full presence is here, not to be achieved, not to be attained, but simply to be revealed. That means that all of us can do it. So, in this passage that we find in the 5th chapter, there are a number of stanzas that use a peculiar term for this equilibrium. It uses a term which we think is Buddhist. It says nirvana, but it's Brahma nirvana. In Buddhism, you won't find Brahma nirvana, you only find nirvana. Why? Because Buddha didn't want to get into all the philosophy. He wanted a simple message for simple people and avoid all the complications. So in one hand, he could teach Four Noble Truths. On two hands, he could give a directional path, the Eightfold Path. Here's the truth. Here's the truth. Here's the practice of the truth. Here's how you realize it. And drop the term Brahma, Brahma Nirvana. But in multiple times we find it. 3 times we'll find in these passages this term Nirvana, hooked in with the term Brahman. So this Brahman Nirvana, the absence of desires, where Brahman itself, the supreme principle within you, is revealed. So this Brahman Nirvana is shown here, and it's these 3 consecutive passages, and it's interesting what Shankaracharya's commentary is, and it amounts to this. In connection with within, that term, in the self, he says, he attains the bliss who has his joy within. That is not dependent on external things, because of the very fact of living, there is a natural foundation of joy which is irrepressible. Now, we've just been on a retreat, and the theme of the retreat was the joy of the presence. And so there's a measure. How do we know when that connectedness is there? Even for an instance, a kind of bubbling internal joy happens. And that's incomparable. And so when we cultivate this joy, then we know as a kind of measure, oh, I see. Not frowning, not going through life with a hair shirt on, not being extremely serious, but bubbling with joy. So the very fact of living is evidence of this joy, and there's a natural fountain of it, and it's irrepressible, it's inexhaustible fountain, just bubbling up within, and it's only just sitting there below the surface, as it were, ready to come out. We block it. We block it with the opposite of joy. We block it with some interesting blocking terms. But, and what if? But if only. We could put the if in there. We could put both together. Making an excuse. We have to transform that. We have to knock out the negative by filling up with the positives. And that has the clarifying effect of revealing this owner who sits there in this 9-gated, 11-gated city. It's his office. It's his grace flowing through all of these things, although we mislabel it as human thought. It's flowing through as thought. If you're reflecting on what I'm saying now, thought is flowing. We don't have to seek, when will I get God's grace? It's flowing here at your reception station. When we acknowledge that flow called thought and observe it properly, we can then simply say, oh, Lord, please flow here, please flow there, and direct it well. The sages, says the Gita in the chapter 5, the sages attain Brahman's bliss. They whose sins have been destroyed and doubts removed, who are self-controlled, goes on like this. You see, false understanding behavior are checked by the opposite, by right understanding. And so what will self-controlled people do, you may wonder? Exactly as God will do. Whatever God you imagine God will do, that person will do. Won't kill anybody, won't criticize anybody, won't blame anybody, won't go into the sensitivity of poor me, nothing like that. You shine upon everybody and everything alike. Bless everyone alike. No friends, no enemies. Everything is there. A beaming source of blessedness everywhere. Such a person would be like that. Be dedicated to Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha, to all beings. If the characteristic of the ego's claims are dropped intelligently, then all life will go on for the welfare of everybody. There's a misunderstanding. A spiritual person locking themselves in a cell and blaming they're not contributing to the social upliftment and conditions of the world. They're insensitive to all the miseries going on around them. No, even from their isolated position, they're beaming for the welfare of all beings. And then expressing itself, often in the appropriate way, actively in the world, in what is deemed to be service, otherwise called worship. Indiscriminately, on the so-called good and bad alike, because the interpretation of what they say they see is not in these categories. It is only in the categories of the ignorant people that they say, I like this person, I don't like this person. This person is good, this person's bad. So all of nature's forces are exactly the same, actually. Even if I am a confirmed murderer, destined to be hanged tomorrow, still, somehow, my nails still grow, the investment still continues until that's gone. Supposing I'm to be hanged at, let's say, 4 o'clock tomorrow, then at 3:59, still my nails are growing. And if you've given this last meal, which I don't see the point of, never mind, then it's still being digested. That supreme flow of grace arriving there and expressing itself there never stops. Right up to the last moment, everything is functioning. If by some mistake or chance the man is only suffocated, not hanged, he can't be hanged again by the law somehow, then it continues. If he's allowed also to live and continue, the nails are still growing, the food is still being digested. And nature doesn't make a distinction. It doesn't judge. You're a murderer, I'll stop pumping your heart. Carries on. And even if social rules condemn a person to death, see, God doesn't condemn. Only humans condemn. So he is all love alone and therefore lovable, never failing in it. You might say, I don't love God. I had a bereavement. Somebody in my family died. Why did God do this cruel thing? You're not understanding. The flow of divine grace is always flowing and never judging. So to the devotees who are free from desire and anger, says the passage, see how the stress is put. Desire, when it's blocked, it comes out as anger and everything else. Then goes on, who have controlled their thought and who have known the self. Brahman's bliss exists everywhere, is seen everywhere, is drunk everywhere. So whichever way we turn, God alone is there. Why don't we notice it? That's the last of the 3 stanzas on this chapter, which is chapter 5, where you find this term Brahma Nirvana. The Buddhists adopted it and dropped that first part. And this Brahman's bliss is continuously repeated. So now reference to in this very life itself is also there. And then we can conclude what's something from the Mundaka Upanishad. The Purusha alone is all this. The universe comprising karma and knowledge, any activity that takes place from, let's say, rituals to any other form of service, that is God in action, and the knowledge that you get is also God in action. The whole thing is the outcome of an ever-flowing divine grace. What a wonderful thing to know. So that the spiritual discipline doesn't become something like an arduous task, doesn't become something that is a struggle or something that is unpleasant. No, it is a constant contact with joy. And that joy itself is discovered through grace. There is the Katha Upanishad, which also tells us only through this grace, the grace of the self, will this revelation come to you. And so it is this grace which is there. It's not that it'll come to you by chance, but it is there always flowing. We just have to tune ourselves into it. We have to tune this antakarana, this internal instrument, into it, and use this faculty of attention. So may you all be blessed with divine grace. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swami.
Yeah.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Slam. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.